Dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure to introduce Agne Narušytė. Agne Narušytė is an art critic and curator interested in contemporary photography and art and linking photography, philosophy, and psychology. She is a professor at Vilnius Academy of Arts. Agne Narušytė curated the Photographic collection of Lithuanian Art Museum, photography exhibitions at Center of Contemporary Art, Vilnius Picture Gallery, and compiled several exhibition catalogs and photography albums. Also lectured at Vilnius Academy of Arts and Edinburgh Napier University in United Kingdom, edited the foreign culture page of the Lithuanian cultural weekly Septynios Meno Dienos, and created programs on culture for the Lithuanian national television. She published 3 monographs. One is Aesthetic of Boredom in Lithuanian Photography. The second one is Lithuanian Photography from 1990 to 2010. And the last one, Camera Obscura, History of Lithuanian Photography from 1939 to 1945. So, as always, you can ask questions for Agne Narušytė. You can use the chat in YouTube live stream page, or you can use Slido. And if you are using Slido, please use the code ICTP 2021, ICTP 2021. So feel free to ask the questions. And now the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I'll start sharing my screen. Yes. Yeah, I hope the slides are changing, just checking. So I would like to talk about this particle of time, the moment, which is kind of imaginary, how it works for photography, actually how contemporary photographers working now rethink the moment. So I'll read my text. Life towards death, change and duration make us think of time as a flow. Yet moments are no less important for the imagination of time. They are hypothetical entities, as St. Augustine's attempt to capture the present showed almost 2000 years ago. For him, the present was a non-moment, constantly sliding away. While interpreting the present as duration, Henri Bergson tried to throw the real and simultaneously unreal moment out of thinking about time. Edmund Husserl rather defined the passing of time as experiences deposited in memory, and he did not discuss moments, which would be something not flowing in the flow. But for Emmanuel Levinas, new time and the flow of time would start after the encounter with the other, producing a break in the static time. Thus, Levinas reintroduced the moment into the discussion of time. And although time slips away in our everyday experience, any significant event seems to stop it for us, at least for a while. This is how special moments remain in memory, stopped as if cut out of the flow or photographed. In their own turn, photographs, those archetype stopped moments, seem to confirm to us that time is really made of discrete particles. Photography was an instrument for seeing time from its inception. It was constantly improved in order to speed up the process so that one could conquer time and capture the escaping moments. The first images seen in silver salts would soon disappear. When this problem was solved and the images got fixed, photographers had to stop reality in front of the camera to make it visible in their slow photographs. The exposure time became increasingly shorter until it became possible to capture movements invisible to the eye, like a horse galloping, a car passing by, a bullet. Simultaneously, the interval between the intention to capture a fragment of reality and the finished image had to be shortened. Now, mobile phones with built-in cameras can almost slice every moment and prevent it from disappearing. Thanks to digital photography, images appear almost at the speed of thought. There are technologies that we can use to freeze three-dimensional slices of time or to speed up slow change in order to make it visible. All this transforms both the temporal structure of photography and our experience of time. I shall discuss these transformations by analyzing recent photographic works by several Lithuanian artists: Shaman by Algirdas Šeškus, Interiors by Jurgita Remeikytė, and Ocean by Akvilė Anglickaitė. Photographs are instruments for exploring time because, according to Geoffrey Batchen, time becomes space and space becomes time. This was a quote. Once time is translated into space, it can be viewed, explored, even touched. The fragment of space is identified with a moment. One shot is equal to one moment. For many, this means the decisive moment, which expresses the essence of the photographic. Photographers remember mid-20th century with nostalgia, when unperturbed by restrictions, they kept catching decisive moments and thus created memorable iconic images by spending just a tiny part of the second of their time, such as Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare by Henri Cartier-Bresson. Yet if we pay attention to the definition of the decisive moment by its author, Cartier-Bresson, it is not just a frozen fragment of changing reality. Such photography is the result of combined actions of the photographer pressing the button, composing, wishing to say something through the photograph, and reality. And here I will quote, there will be a big quotation from Cartier-Bresson. To me, photography is the simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of the significance of an event, as well as of a precise organization of forms which give that event its proper expression. I believe that through the act of living, the discovery of oneself is made concurrently with the discovery of the world around us, which can mold us, but which can also be affected by us. A balance must be established between these two worlds, the one inside us and the one outside us. As the result of a constant reciprocal process, both these worlds come to form a single one. And it is this world that we must communicate. End of quote. The world created by balancing the inside and the outside in a decisive moment melts the difference between the subject and the object, between the self and the other, thus creating the illusion of objective reality. Paradoxically, such a precisely composed photograph of a moment negates time by destroying its duration. It becomes like special moments in our lives when time stops. The photographer Algirdas Šeškus, weary of such dead time in photographs, tries to express the experience of a special moment by dividing it into particles in his series Shaman, created in 2012. Šeškus created the series while traveling around the temples of India and Himalaya. Once he found himself unexpectedly next to the shaman Karma Tashi, who was in trance and transmitting the energy of higher dimensions to the people around him. Šeškus pointed his camera and pressed the button, remembering the photographer's obligation and purpose, but also forgetting everything, yielding to the moment, to the face, becoming that face as the other who in Levinas philosophy disturbs the subject static time with the immemorial and the unforeseeable. I quote, "The past of the other in which eternity acquires form, the absolute past that connects all times," end of quote. Shaman's face, photographed by Šeškus extremely close up, is disturbing, as if unknowable, blurred, hiding between the folds of his colorful clothes, emerging and then disappearing again into darkness, which the artist enhanced with a velvet depth of specially selected paper, and printing black and white photographs. He published the series in a small book and then showed it at the 2014 Documenta in Athens and the exhibition Ecstasy in Stuttgart in 2018. And here I'm using images scanned from the book. This is why they are not really deep black. They're a bit brownish in the book, not the originals. While turning the pages of the book, the shaman's face is changing only slightly. The repetition of almost the same is the strongest effect here. Only the shifting light and dark tones in the images, while the shaman turns, tilts his head backwards, his eye flashes, his hand makes a gesture. Grained images bind the entire book into a single prolonged moment. And the texts written by the photographer tell us about the experience of encountering the shaman. It started with a song, the drums luring the photographer, but the shaman's trance, the frankincense, and his closeness blurred the difference between objects. I quote, "I can see that this is varied," Šeškus writes, "that the totality is not something, that it is totally slushy. I see that totality consists of an infinity of parts, but also I don't want, I cannot, because I have nothing inside me to compare those parts. I don't want and I can't, and I have nothing in myself to decide which one of the present parts is more significant," end of quote. In that slipping wet swelter, thoughts and notions disappear because the expiry date of meanings is coming close, because time seems to be ending completely. This was a quote as well. The ecstasy of trance destroys the feeling of time, and the photography is no longer present here and now. The past disappears for him, and the entire experience is bathed in the lethe. And the future loses importance, and there is no demand for it. I quote him again. Movement, the servant of the idea continuing into the future, experiences freedom and calms down, end of quote. The vibrating, expanding, thickening moment of ecstasy cuts the moment out of the flow of everydayness. When Shaman is presented as a large panel at a show, here it is, at a show, the entire duration of ecstasy is visible as a momentous image. It is pure because there is nothing beside the shaman's face and darkness in the photographs. Falling out of time is a significant state of mind for Šeškus that can be experienced only by people with aesthetic or religious sensibility. I quote, "Ecstasy does not happen to those who are drunk with earth and time," end of quote, he once said to me. Shaman's trance frees him and those surrounding him from time, because this extended moment is reaching for eternity. But in this experience, Šeškus also finds an explanation of the function of photography. According to Bachan, photography emerged from the desire to capture both eternity and transience in the same representation. Photography remains in time to witness what passes and preserve it, and preserve moments so that we could not lose them. Thus, in Šeškus's vision, it is thrown out of the state of trance. The photography is thrown out of the state of trance to carry out a task. And I quote him again, "The dandruff of the brain in the head that has melted in the lethe keep emerging from the second, third, fourth, or fifth plane, from whatever layer or gap, from whatever dimension, in order to get photographed. The lethe makes an exception to photography when it washes its image. Very black scarabs, proud long-necked cats and cows, not dedicated to milk, and various kinds reminding of people in their lower parts, and various kinds with people's heads, both monochrome and very smooth. They are all slippery," end of quote. In the state of total ecstasy, photography is allowed not to forget. Particularities have been deleted from the photographs of the shaman. The face is hardly visible in twilight. Thus, the heat of the prolonged moment is conveyed, also the impression that there is no photographer anymore. Nobody sees, nobody composes, nobody selects, nobody slices the moments. There is no subject because He has fallen out of time and is acting mechanically, and there cannot be a single decisive moment this time. There is only the thickness of slipping through moments out of time. I thought previously that I'm important, Sheshku says. I thought that I am the most important part of everything. And then there is the shaman. Then there are others and the environment. There is space which connects me with them. And then it comes out that only the photographic space exists, which my camera forms from me and the existing, or without me and existing for itself. End of quote. There is only space in these photographs, no time, although they have captured an intensive and fixed special moment. The hectic division of the moment by pressing the shutter does not reach its reality. Thus, it seems that the photograph as a moment only cuts a fragment out of the space-time continuum and does not open up time. We cannot see the becoming of physical reality, time as duration, in the frame that includes only a tiny particle of a second. Yet this is just an impression. Already the inventors of photography noticed that one shot seemed to paradoxically contain more than one moment. In 1840, this is a bit an earlier photograph, but that's what he showed in 1940, Jacques-Louis Mandé-Daguerre demonstrated to his audience several prints representing important places of Paris. He had to explain to the novices of the future photographic culture the relationship between the appearance of the photographs, exposure time, and the time of the day. Bachin comments that those photographs not only captured the flow of time by showing changing shadows in each frame, but also presented time as linear sequence of discrete yet related moments, folded the past and the future into the present moment. This means also that not only a sequence, but also each photograph can be seen as an extended duration, although extremely slowed down to make time observable, to let us reflect on it. Therefore, already in mid-19th century, the photographic print was understood not as a slice of one moment, but as a longer interval of time, when the experience of time is coded in references to the changing light and atmosphere, to the movement of objects. Moreover, photographs affect us only when we add the implied past and future to their present, as Roland Barthes pointed out, because only thus the blind spot inseparable from our true vision is created. In film, on the contrary, there is no present, only the flow from the past to the future akin to our everyday experience of time. Film, which deletes the gaps between the shots, also destroys the possibility to see the moment. The screen becomes a blind spot from which the reality of the present moment is constantly rushing away. Thus, film does not give a chance to the viewer to intervene, Barthes says. Do I add anything to the images in film, he asks. I do not think so. I don't have time. In front of the screen, I do not have freedom to choose to close my eyes. Otherwise, upon opening them again, I would not find the same image. I have to obey the constant insatiability. End of quote. Thus, if we want to observe the moment as duration, we need to go back to photography. But a simple frame capturing the decisive moment is no longer enough. Contemporary photography has to rethink its own temporality by opposing it to time as a flow, also to the temporality of film. The Japanese photographer Hiroshi Sugimoto was among the first to problematize the moment by linking it to the temporality of film in his series Theaters, which he started in 1976. In the center of each photograph, there is a wide screen and the architecture of the interior of a cinema dimly lit. Sugimoto photographed all cinemas in the same way. He put a large format camera in the balcony and directed it towards the screen. The exposure took all the time of the film that was being screened. Thus, the duration of the film decided the duration of exposure and the visibility of the interior. In this series, film is the only source of light molding the structure and decor of the interior in darkness, and the film as a series of images burns out, only a luminescent white rectangle remains. As David Green says, theater series, I quote, runs counter to the prevailing conceptions of photography's relationship to instantaneity and to the photographic image as the record of a brief and transitory moment in time, end of quote. And Sugimoto's photographs are, I quote, born from the transient existence of thousands of other images from the death of the film, end of quote. Thus it is symbolic that the screen, having become a static photograph, according to David Sutton, shines as the blind spot in cinematic thinking on time. The viewer of Sugimoto's photographs encounters not two, but three different regimes of time: the elusive and the imponderable moment brought to consciousness by the photographic image, but it has condensed the light emitted by a film of certain duration. And there is also the long duration of photographing, which corresponds to the duration of a specific film, but records a completely different image. The overlapping three durations contradict the imaginary momentariness of the image, which is presented as a lingering process or duration. The duration is palpable in the visual language of the photographs, the patterns of the interiors, pale and lit as if from beyond, the light vibrating the edges of the white screen, the very contrast between light and dark distorting the space, the bright screen gravitating from the back wall towards the foreground, and the closer but dimmer objects receding into the distance. The series Interiors by Jurgita Remeikytė could be treated as a response to Sugimoto's theaters, only here time itself is captured instead of the time of the film. Remeikytė photographs the interiors of old, no longer used photo cameras, thus bidding farewell to them and to analog photography. Her large photographs led the audience into the unseen photographic culture of the past. The cameras were produced in Russia, Japan, Britain, Germany, France, America, as a novelty for the expectant enthusiasts for hunting images, and now have been thrown out, given away, broken. Even their names, now exotic, remind of the cosmic ambitions and youthfulness of modernity: Sputnik, New Rocket, Lerev, First Reflex, Sakura. Some express a self-ironic attitude towards the powers of photography: Narcisse, Peacock, Beauty Canter, Little Nipper. Just from these titles, one could map a different thinking about photography and a different time when people still believed that it was worth stopping moments and exploring them. People who used such cameras still remember looking at their friends through the viewfinder, then putting the film containing nothing into the developer, revealing the captured moment, fixing it, drying, showing it to everyone, sharing and pasting it into albums, then viewing them again as stories and sharing memories. All this process involving a lot of time. Recently, those cameras were exchanged for better ones. They capture sharper images and do it faster. But Remeikytė brings us back to the beginning and tells us to look at the process that needed darkness and the space where the secret work of light was taking place and taking time. The interiors of cameras are captured at a moment when they are photographing, opening their insides and letting the light in. The image flowing in through the apertures remains invisible, but there are things to look at in the dark boxes of cameras, like in Sugimoto's cinemas. The layout of each interior is different. Concavities, roundedness, protuberances, distances, and shapes are different. The cameras contain things, handles, screws, and other details unfamiliar to those who are not professional photographers, but we can explore them and have fun guessing their functions, like curious guests left alone by the host. The apertures are also varied, some larger, some smaller, and not all of them regularly round. Thus, we see the camera obscura, in which the future photograph is accommodated for a short while, and sometimes for a longer while, because the image used to stay invisible and rolled up until the entire film of 24 or 36 frames was exposed. For a less enthusiastic photographer, this could have taken even a year or so. There were no temporal limits. one could forget what one had there. Thus, finally, taken out into the red light of the lab, those images would look strange, no longer understandable, the reason for taking them unknown. It is difficult to imagine now how this feels when one can see what one has got immediately after pressing the shutter. We look and we press again and again. Perhaps one good shot will accidentally happen. Then the limited number of possible shots and the price of the film prevented us from pressing the shutter repeatedly. Every image was carefully considered. Remeikytė lets us into the interior of old photography so that we could re-experience the state of uncertainty, feeling how the image comes in slowly with light. What it would be like, a landscape, a face, a street. The viewer has become a light-sensitive film and longs for a special image created just for him or her, which they can imagine while absorbing the flow of light, slowly pulsating, expanding, but arrested at the boundary of darkness. This experience of moving light in non-moving photographs is an optical illusion, but so realistic that each photograph affects the viewer as a delayed moment. Due to the long exposure, the details in these interiors are not sharp, as if they were painted, and the glass of the lenses is blurred. The outlines are dissolving in the halo of light. Thus, the planes of the prints contain a deepish dark space in which one cannot see almost anything, as if it was only for touching, like in those times when the film had to be taken out of the camera in darkness. Nobody touches the inside of a digital camera this way. Nobody has even seen it. Perhaps there is no inside there. As Willem Flusser wrote before the digital age, when photographing becomes simpler, the apparatus becomes more complicated. It becomes a black box collecting information useful for the apparatus itself. The interior of these old cameras, on the contrary, can be easily understood. Perhaps Remeikytė had to make those interiors even sharper and brighter in order to pay homage to the past of photography, but she has decided differently. I kept thinking for a long time what I should focus on, she said, and then I understood. The knives that are cutting off the image should be sharp. End of quote. In the general fog of darkened interiors, the edges of black metal shutters seem to be shining. During this prolonged moment of photographing, the shutters are open, waiting all tense until the set time ends, and they can shut with a snap movement and slice a bit of time. The moment will happen. While waiting for it, light is burning silver, the blind spot in the camera's eye. There will be no moment, however, because all these cameras are working in vain. Their darkness is lit by the photographer and the viewer's gaze. The viewer is exploring the insides of the camera as if searching for the secret life of photography. Yet the gaze is penetrating the dead body after the death of photography produced with such cameras. Photography itself once declared the death sentence to painting, and now a statement attributed to Marcel Duchamp by Mel Bochner in his Misunderstandings, a Theory of Photography, becomes relevant. I quote, "I would like to see photography make people despise painting until something else will make photography unbearable." End of quote. That something else is digital photography itself, which has transgressed the dreams of the industrial age. Thus, interiors return a postmodern viewer who has seen too many images to the silence of the beginning, to the place where something has not yet happened, so that in the twilight of the gallery, its walls were painted in darkish color for that occasion, they would look at the open aperture and see time flowing in. Sugimoto and Remeikytė have revealed a contradiction between the transient nature of photography and the flow of time, and by inserting flow into the shots, they have stretched the walls framing the moment. These two artists create meta-images in V.J.T. Mitchell's sense, rethinking analog photography as an apparatus of seeing time through its blind spot. Yet digitalization changes the temporal aspect of photography. In the 1990s, Paul Virilio predicted a temporal catastrophe where the space would be marginalized and engulfed by the dromospherical timeline, superseding the cyclical and the linear versions of time. The cone of total presence spreading from one point would annihilate local time zones. The endless day and the possibility to get information immediately would delete the sense of the sequence of facts and the need to remember them. We would be spellbound by the dazzlement of this hypercenter of time and live in the desert of world time where everything would remain as it was, except for being qualitatively discredited in this time world that will respond in future to our every desire. Now, my time is ending, so I'll cut it a bit shorter, this last part. So basically, photography participates in this process, which turns our life in the desert of time, according to Virilio. And lots of realities that we photograph become derealized a bit and illusory. And also we like to share those images online constantly, and they are appearing at the speed of thought, and they are replacing language as a means of communication. Also this introduces a change in the perception of time in photography, because the photograph on the screen is also looked at for a while. It exists there, it has a different life there, and this perception adds something to this transient and also eternal moment fixed in the photograph. And my remaining, or not remaining time, I will use to talk a bit about the last work I wanted to present. It is The Ocean by Akvilė Anglickaitė. So myriads of digital photographs produce an ocean of moments that are quickly looked at, stored in ever-expanding memory cards, shared online, but forgotten as quickly when new moments replace the old ones at accelerating speed. This ocean of photographs as forgotten moments emerging paradoxically because of our desire to preserve each possible moment is evidence to the time independent of us, existing beyond the limits of our control or understanding, but somehow recognizable, like Ocean by Akvilė Anglickaitė, generated by an algorithm. The unreal waves that were beating in the loft of the Bernardines Church in Vilnius were emanating a pleasant rhythm. They induced the audience to contemplate them endlessly, even though knowing they were not real. Anglickaitė thinks this is because the image detached from reality promises eternity. The photographic image has made a promise, Anglickaitė says, and by promising us something it cannot give, it draws us towards itself over and over again, end of quote. Yet the endlessly reoccurring waves are the same, although they create the impression of movement. Nothing new, nothing unexpected happens. Thus the very flow of time gets stuck like a computer error. While we are watching the waves, our personal flow of time is swallowed by the false and unreal time of this ocean, by this repetition of precisely the same under the roof of the building responsible for spreading faith, or closer to God and the heaven. Now ocean no longer existing in a specific place, but as a possibility in a data file, works as an allegory of contemporaneity. While the observer watches the waves and believes in the vast expanse of water, she feels that the real ocean is no longer necessary. This effective installation convinces that life on screens might be enough for us, that reality overfilled with digital images is constantly ready to fill every space and every moment of experience with something. Our relationship with a place and with the past is sacrificed so that we could always float in the present aimlessly, easily, because the world, to tell the truth, has already become Virilio's desert of time. To sum it up, in this desert of time, it seems that photography, having dissolved in digital codes and jammed onto screens, lends its ambiguous relationship with time to everybody glued to the screen. The contradictions present in each photographic image between the movement of time imperceptible to consciousness and stopping it for eternity, between the medium of memory and the impossibility to remember, between the focus on now and its unavoidable transience and pastness, allow us to see it as a point of reference for reflection on time. And the diversity of the forms of photographic moments, also its ubiquitous presence among people, between narratives, between moments, help us create ambiguous, distorted experiences of malleable time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for this, I think, thought-provoking and really interesting presentation, which is also, in a sense, as a presentation of Lithuanian art a little bit.
Yes.
At least virtually, as we are doing everything virtually this year. And we have several questions in our live view stream and in Slido. So I want to start from a question by Veronica 1, which says that, does it make sense to you if to say that time is compressed into a photographic moment?
Yes, of course it does. As I said, quoting somebody, I mean, many people wrote about this this moment that is recorded, because it's just a fraction of a second, usually in contemporary photography. It invites, anyway, our thinking about what happened before and what will happen after. Is in this image, lost, by Cartier-Bresson, we can see that this man will step into the puddle and will wet his feet. We see the future, and of course we are aware of what just happened. By the way, such a decisive moment like this by Cartier-Bresson doesn't give much to think about, to stretch this future and this past. Doesn't give a lot to think about biography of people or about a place. But still, this moment, this fraction of a second, is more just than just about this fraction of a second in our heads. Of course, physically, yes, it is this fraction, but we are looking at photographs, and we see this time, it expands for us. So it is compressed, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. The second question comes from Anonymous, and he or she says that, could we say that the return to historical photography techniques is the temporal act itself, like a symbolic return to the past?
Yes. Yes, of course, this theme could be also included in a discussion of photography's relationship to time. And actually in my book, which will be published soon, I talk about that too, because it's an important aspect. Photographers wary of this digitalized photography, digital photography, how it changes everything, and particularly our perception of time and perception of the image, of its value. They bring old technologies, thus maybe rethinking the past, yes, but also slowing time as well. It's a way to slow time, because those technologies are incredibly slow, especially for our present experience of everything happening very, very fast, of getting images very fast, sending them fast, and so on. And so, yes, it's a travel to the past as well, because also these images that are created with these old technologies, they have this texture of the past. It might seem to us that digital photography is kind of the same record of the reality as this analog photography, the one I'm showing by Cartier-Bresson, or whatever photography done in the past. But every material has a different aesthetic quality, and we perceive that when we look at originals. Of course, seeing it on screen doesn't help. We see only digital stuff.
Yeah, and probably could you briefly say what will be your next book about? Because you already mentioned that you are writing a book now, so it's really interesting, the topic.
Yeah, in this time of acceleration, we are now working, not only me, and I'm together working with my colleagues on several books in parallel, because we have to multiply into several subjects working at the same time on several things. But I really wish to continue writing my book about Lithuanian artists dealing with Anthropocene. That's my next topic. It won't be just about photography. And relating to this topic of time of this conference, this would be about the end times. So, end times is also an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. And I want to ask the last question from the chat. And also Anonymous says that, do you see any difference in the way how temporal dimensions are represented in the photographs made by photographers from different cultures?
Interesting. Well, it would be difficult to generalize it this way, because of course every culture has lots of different photographers. But let's say Japanese photographers have something special about them when we look at them from a distance. I have never been to Japan. So there is this a bit, I would say, mysterious quality in them, and also a tendency of thinking about time, not only just in Sugimoto's photographs. But otherwise, no, I wouldn't say that it's in different cultures. I would say in different periods of historical time, we get these variations of this focusing on a specific aspect of time in photography, which is also influenced by the specific technology used during that period. And this is how, when looking especially from the distance, actually photographs from the same period start to look the same, because they are using the same technology, which is not what we are using now. So they go into the distance, temporal distance, but also we can see that they are dealing with time in a specific way at that period. So probably somebody in the future could be able to say something about our cultures dealing with time, but as framed by time, not by geography.
Thank you very much. And I want to end this this keynote presentation by quoting two comments from the live stream. So Oksana says, thank you very much for an interesting talk. It's inspiring. And once again, Anonymous says, I really like the idea that time could be turned into the space, embodied into photograph and even touch. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for questions and comments.
And thank you all the viewers for your attention. So thank you.
Thank you.